Hey there, everybody. Welcome in. Gorilla Sports Off Ice Postgame Live. Game 7 just wrapped up, and I don't even fully know what to say about it. That was one of the most shocking games that I've ever watched in terms of the way that it concluded, the way that things went so quickly. We're going to unpack it. Look, this is going to be a game. This is going to be a series that is going to take multiple podcasts to unpack fully. And to even be able to process what we just saw here tonight. So we're going to get into all of it. We're going to talk about all of it. I'm Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. We do want to start off again by thanking our great partners over at Accurate America. You never know when the hail and the storms are going to come here in this summer season. The last thing you want to do is be caught when it does. So make sure you guys are calling before the storm. 303-900-ROOF. Give them a call before the storm. They're going to work with your insurance. They're going to guarantee the work for as long as you are in the home. Accurate America, they do great work. This is the exact time of year when you never know where it's coming. 303-900-ROOF. Give them a call. Megan, the question that I asked Gabe Landeskog when we walked into the locker room was, how do you even process this? And he said, I don't know. How are you processing what we just saw?
I am still pretty shocked. So the processing hasn't even really begun. I'm digging back into things that I liked about the series and strengths of the Avs game and trying to figure out how it wasn't enough to get them across the finish line. And the thing I'm coming back to is the Avs are a team that really wanted to win, and the Dallas Stars are a team that didn't know how to lose. And I think there's a difference between those two mindsets, and the Avs found themselves on the bad end of that tonight. There's a reason this went 7 games too. So I think that's the other part that's a little hard to process is each game outside of the 2 overtime ones, right? And then of course, game 5, there were different stories inside of them that showed a lot more hope in the series for Colorado, but it's going to take a little bit for me to process the further implications of what this loss means more than anything.
Yeah. And we'll touch on that a little bit. But like you said, I think that for everybody involved, even the organization, coaches, players, it's going to take a couple days to even, reconcile what just happened. And I can't remember. I just want to make a quick point off of something that you said there. I can't remember who it was. I believe it was Corey from the Denver Post a couple days ago said, look, this series, it's been so – first of all, what an outstanding just hockey series this was, Megan. I mean, if this wasn't a team that we were covering and we're so close with, we'd be watching that going, holy smokes, give me 7 more of those. It was an outstanding series. And whoever it was on Twitter the other day was pointing out, it's crazy that we're in this situation where you have 2 teams that could win the Stanley Cup, and they happen to be paired up with each other, and one of them is going to go home with a loss that people are going to say is unacceptable. And look, right, wrong, indifferent, whether you agree, disagree, with who should have won, whatever. I think that was spot on that you ended up with a team, and it's the Colorado Avalanche, who are going home with a loss that a lot of people are going to say you can't have. It's unacceptable. People have to be fired. And it was going to be one of these teams. So, it's a crazy game, hockey, and a game 7, no less. But, Megan, I think the part that's going to be the hardest to again figure out and even evaluate how you feel about this series and even this game is how well the Avs played for large stretches, for large portions of the series. But look, I said it when this series started. The Avs and Stars have never gotten together, whether it be for an individual game, Western Conference Final, a first round. They have never gotten together and had a normal series. We knew it was going to be weird. We knew it was going to be bounces and things like that. And for me, that's exactly how it shook out. Just 2 teams trading haymakers, and it ends in an unpredictable way.
Yeah, I think the weird bounces benefited both teams at different points in the
100%.
series. And the officiating, I think it couldn't really get worse from Game 5. I think it steadied a bit, but it still lingers over this series. And I think that when people reflect on how this series unfolded the way that it did, I think it's going to always include a little bit of the officiating. And that's kind of a bummer because there was a lot of really good hockey that got played too.
Yeah, so let's just address the officiating from tonight right now, because what I was saying to other folks here in the media room, I'm not about to say, oh, the Avalanche got jobbed, anything like that. But you know what I will say, Megan? And again, this applies in both directions. I'm just talking about the entirety of Game 7. That game was not called like a Game 7, in my opinion. That was called like a regular season game. Usually the complaints you hear from people in a Game 7 are like, oh my gosh, they're just letting them go with prison rules out there. This was a very tightly called game. Do you agree?
Yeah, I really did. Honestly, it wasn't until I saw the reaction on Twitter about how it was officiated that I had to reflect on it a little bit more, because I thought, there were things that happened that didn't get called that were those hockey plays that I felt weren't allowed to be played through in Game 5. So I thought a little bit more of that was allowed to just occur in the game. And sure, maybe it lacked a little bit of consistency at times, but officiating doesn't stand out as the story of Game 7 from my standpoint.
No, definitely not. I mean, there's a lot to talk. I'm definitely not blaming this on the refs or anything like that for the Avs, but it was something that we were constantly talking about up here in the press box. And again, I'm talking about arms going up in both directions, where it's like, really? All right, I didn't think you would call that in a Game 7. Usually for the third period of these types of games, the whistles are put away, and I agree with you. I don't think penalties or poor officiating was a story of Game 7, but it is hard to look at two straight power play goals for the Dallas Stars inside the last 10 minutes of the third period, and that ends up being the difference. Megan, the Avs did a lot of things well in this game for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and then it all kind of got away from them. Mikko Rantanen scores the hat trick, I guess. What did you think of the way that this group played tonight, particularly through the first two periods for the Colorado Avalanche?
Well, there's a lot to like. In the first period, I thought that was the Avs' best period. They came out with a lot of intensity. And it's interesting, too, that they don't even open up the scoring in this frame. But there's a lot of things that I liked about how they started this game. They were supporting each other in battles, and they were quick to win those races to battles to sort of give themselves an edge where they couldn't in numbers, just to be cautious in how they tried to come up with pucks. And they were more careful on their exits. They'd usually hit the speed, like Colorado's D would usually hit the speed instantly. But after the Druin mistake of Game 5, they were a little bit more cautious on exits to ensure that they really had solid possession in the transition before all the D left their own end. And you saw them get rewarded for that kind of caution that they approached the game with too, because Dallas was trying to get back into their end and stand them up at their own blue line. And so I thought Colorado did a lot to make those adjustments, to work through some of the things that Dallas does well to slow them down. And so there were some, high danger chances that they generated on that first power play. It's the double minor, but you just kind of knew when they didn't capitalize on it.
Yep.
This is going to be exactly one of those power plays that we look at in hindsight as you really needed to score here. And honestly, I think we could get into this a little bit later about the special teams conversation around this game. So before I completely shift gears to that, I liked a lot of how they applied pressure in the first period. They lead in the shots battle, but it's obviously close. And they limit their mistakes with the puck, too. You see that there were a couple close calls with turnovers, but they were able to recover from them quickly. And then going into the second period, I had a little nerves about how the energy of it started for them. But the way that they transmuted that into something positive, obviously with the shorthanded goal, completely changed the momentum of that game. It's kind of where it felt so 50-50, both teams fighting for ice until that moment. Colorado really emerged as the front runner in the game, and the ice was tilted in their favor. You could see that the momentum was carrying them a lot too, because analytically the numbers favored Colorado in a lot of ways through that point, but they obviously didn't capitalize on it. So the other thing too is, before I get out of the second period, Jake Ottinger, that's the story of Game 7 in a lot of ways. You know, his expected goals tonight finish at 3.68, only allows 2 goals against. The high danger chances 12-9 in favor of Colorado. Jake Ottinger had an incredible series for Dallas, and it's not just the story of Game 7, it's the story of the series.
100%. You know, we talked going into this series about how you know, Jake Ottinger has a spotty track record in the playoffs. You know, we've seen him do exactly what he did here. Then we've seen him kind of come unraveled at the seams. If not for Jake Ottinger, the Avs win this series in probably 5, you know, at most 6. So I'm with you. He's not just the story here tonight. He is the star of the series, and maybe only outdone by Mikko Rantanen right there near the end. Let's talk about special teams. You and I said this morning, the team who wins a special teams battle is going to come out on top tonight. And to your point, Logan O'Connor just outworks everybody on the ice. Great activation by Josh Manson to jump in on that rush. And you're sitting there saying, okay, so you killed off the early power play. And now, in the process of killing this penalty in the second period, you score a shorthanded goal, so you're winning the special teams battle. And I'm with you. It felt like, okay, there you go. That's the moment. The Avs jumped on the gas. The ice felt like it was tilted back the other way. And that's what was going through my mind, was special teams battle. Can you win the special teams battle? And they were off to such a good start, and it felt like they were feeding on it. And, you know, we talked about Jake Ottinger. Through that point, through the second period, Mackenzie Blackwood was outstanding for the first 2 periods of this game. And I think that's part of what adds to the shock of what happened there in the third. But it felt like the Avs really started putting the pressure on and taking over and not allowing Dallas to get up the ice quickly, turning pucks back in the neutral zone. It felt like they were doing so many little things right that, you know, it gave you confidence heading into the third period that, like, hey, this team is doing something right. Dallas is going to have to be exceptional to get back into this one.
Yeah, and you look at how the second period started. Colorado was allowing a few odd man rushes against there for a flurry, and so before that shorthanded goal, things were actually a little dicey for the Avs. They had done so much to control the game through that point that they needed to throw some cold water on it and settle it down, right? And so they get the shorthanded goal, then obviously the MacKinnon goal early into the third period. So they're sustaining a little bit of that good momentum built up after they shifted the tide, because things weren't great for them at the start of the second period. And you get a great save from Blackwood too after the MacKinnon goal. That's the one where he had to push kind of post to post to stop the Duchesne wrister. And so you've got a lot of these highs, right? You've got now the Manson goal, the MacKinnon goal, and a huge save from your goalie. Obviously, he's been coming up with saves all night, but that one just felt like this could really get out of hand, right? And then it did. I think they didn't manage the puck very well after that point. They get caught in transition, and that's where things begin to unravel. I'm sure we'll kind of pin that for a different discussion entirely, the unraveling of the Avs in the third period.
Well, so let me ask you this, Megan. Let's just kind of unpack it now, because now keep in mind, I was actually in the elevator when Dallas scored the second goal to tie it. Do you think they unraveled? Like, do you think they you know, for lack of a better, do you think they choked this one away? Is that how you describe it?
You know, from the Makar stick break on, yes. And that happens kind of shortly after this. So they get caught in transition, and it's a classic Mikko Rantanen goal. He picks his spot from the slot and just kind of beats everyone around him. You know, Mackenzie Blackwood actually has another huge save after the initial Rantanen goal too, on a Harley shot. It's in his pad off a cross slot feed from Rantanen. He has to push, but he sees it, and you see Harley have the same reaction that we've seen Cale Makar have with Ottinger all series. So, like, through this point, about 9 minutes into the third period, the Avs are still in this game, right? But
they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, they're in the driver's seat. They get the power play. And then Makar stick breaks on the one-timer. That's really where the unraveling begins, because everything with the Rantanen goal, just like a couple seconds ago I described, they could survive that. They're still leading in that game, right? It's the stick break where things really unraveled for them. And this is hard to talk about because I think things personally unraveled for Cale Makar after the disaster sequence unfolded, because I think it really shook him up mentally, feeling responsible for what had happened.
Yeah, and see, the reason I asked you that question was because I was talking to just people as we were waiting to go in the room, and I was telling them, I said, look, like you said, we're gonna revisit this game on Monday on the pod and really kind of deep dive into what happened here. But I really did I really looked at that third period as like the Makar stick breaks. I'll be honest. This is the one call that I will say outright I don't like. I don't like the tripping call on Cale Makar. The NHL made a point of changing the rule at some point in the last decade that said, hey, if you make contact with the puck first, we're not going to call you for tripping. So I don't like the Makar trip. Doesn't matter. At the end of the night, it does not matter. It felt like Dallas got a little bit of that momentum, and it just all started running downhill for them. There was a lot of emphasis this morning with people talking about, with both coaches and players, saying there's not a lot of momentum in this series. It feels like the minute one team starts to run, the other one pushes back. And this felt like for the first time in this series, one team started to run, and they just ran it right to the end of the game.
Yeah, you know what fueled them too is I think Dallas is a team fueled by spite, so I don't think they liked the call that originally gave Colorado that power play.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell there was frustration for the Duchesne tripping call. And so I think that gave them a little bit of spite. And then when they get this breakaway opportunity, obviously with the broken stick, and then they're able to draw a penalty to make it 4v4 briefly, that's where you're absolutely right. They went running with it. And I think they're already motivated by a little bit of spite, feeling like something unjust had happened to them. So it was vindicating them, like, well, now's our chance. And it wasn't immediate too. Like on the kill that followed the 4v4 play, OC had the puck in the ozone trying for another shorthanded chance, and he had to survive a huge hit. And then the things begin to kind of unfold.
Yeah, it I mean, like I said, I'm scrolling through Twitter here. It's a lot of people share the sentiment. Like it's shocking to even know what happened. Let's get into a little bit of the more specifics. I guess when you look at the goals, what are your thoughts on Mackenzie Blackwood? Hey, look, the Avs got their bounces in Game 6. The Stars get theirs tonight. In the form of that second Mikko Rantanen goal. What did you think of Mackenzie Blackwood tonight?
I thought he was good. I thought he was good enough to win Game 7. I think the team in front of him didn't do enough to support him. And so I would describe Ottinger as great, excellent, fantastic. You know, the word I'd use for Mackenzie Blackwood is a lot milder, but I also still think he gave a performance that gave them a chance to win. Especially, you know, you go up 2-0, you're in the driver's seat, you become unraveled because of a weird play, and then, you know, the puck goes off Girard's skate on the wraparound from Mikko, so that's kind of that first Mikko power play goal, and you just really feel for Blackwood. That's kind of another weird one. There've been a lot of weird ones in this series. And then I start to feel frustration with the penalty kill on the Wyatt Johnston goal. So I'm not even totally faulting Mackenzie Blackwood, because it's a copy-paste power play goal that we've seen in this series that I gave Coyle the benefit of the doubt the last time, you know, when Kivy was without the stick, right? Well, now Taves and Coyle, both players have sticks, right? They don't even anticipate the cross ice, like the cross crease. There we go, the cross crease pass. And I'm frustrated by that. I've supported the penalty kill over this series. I don't think the numbers have reflected that I think it's better than it has analytically looked, that's where you lose me a little bit. And so you notice I'm not blaming Mackenzie Blackwood harshly for these goals. Obviously, he could have stood on his head and completely been a difference maker, but I would have found myself feeling like, well, with the way the Avs played and kind of this, I don't know, 10-minute segment, they didn't deserve to win. They let it shake their heads mentally, and they'd been the stronger team through more of this contest, but there is a unit of measure for the team that wins it. It's the win, and it's advancing to the second round. And so I don't need a fancy analytic to measure the weight of that.
Well, and what's so tough, to your exact point, is that they were the better team. They did deserve to win right up until these moments that we're talking about. And then I'm with you. They let it get away from them. Mikko Rantanen, Meghan, for as much as what we just said is true, the Avs didn't do enough. They didn't kill the penalty. All that remains true. Mikko Rantanen had a say in this game tonight, and boy, oh boy, did he have a lot to say. Mikko Rantanen factors in on the last 8 Dallas Stars goals in this series. I want to park a minute here to talk about this because a lot of conversation around Mikko Rantanen. I do want to point out, one, a lot of criticism, and a lot of it fair, about trading Mikko Rantanen. I'm not going to tell anybody they shouldn't feel upset, pissed off, whatever, if they're feeling about that way about trading Mikko Rantanen. The one teeny tiny bit of perspective that I remind people to keep is the Avs did not trade him to the Dallas Stars. Chris McFarland, in his wildest dreams, did not imagine he was going to trade Mikko Rantanen and then run into him in the first round with what you could maybe say is the Avs' biggest rival, going back 30 years now at this point. So they never thought that he'd end up here, but he did, and he made it count.
Yes, he did.
Do you have any thoughts on Mikko?
Not right now.
Okay.
He obviously is the reason the comeback effort was successful for Dallas. He has his fingerprints on every trace of it. And he came alive the final 2 games in this series in a way that's recognizable to Colorado Avalanche fans. So it's not entirely surprising, though it is a little frustrating, because he did Mikko Rantanen things, which are entirely predictable to the people who used to be his teammate, in my opinion. And so there's no better foil for the Mikko Rantanen things than the people who probably know him best. And that's a little frustrating, but also credit to Mikko Rantanen and the player that he is. He's carried the brunt of a lot of criticism for not holding up to the standard that people expected him immediately following the trade from Carolina to Dallas. So, even in Carolina, right? People just didn't feel like he lived up to the expectation of being this elite winger in the league that's regarded in a top 5, top 10 NHLer category. Every season, the points seemed to show this story, but then his early returns in Carolina, early returns in Dallas, people were skeptical that, was he just a MacKinnon merchant, right?
Right.
And so he answered that in a pretty poetic way to close out this series. He's a pretty impactful player in his own right. And I don't think it takes away from, my feelings about what Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon can represent, but one player especially delivered tonight, and that was Mikko Rantanen.
And Meghan, to your point about in a way that Avs fans and players are used to, honestly, this series played out almost exactly as a lot of first-round series have for Mikko Rantanen when he was with the Avs, where kind of quietly picking up points behind the scenes here and there, not overly impactful to start. People kind of get on him a little bit, and then he comes alive in the biggest moments at the most critical times. Meghan, I do want us to talk about what happens next, where things kind of go. And again, we're going to get more clarity and we're going to get better understanding over the next couple days. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And, just Nathan MacKinnon called this the most shocking loss of his career. I think this is going to take a couple days to process. So I do want to get into that. Guys, this is a Megan and I were talking before we went live. This is a weird show. That was. I mean, you could tell by the answers in the locker room we got from players, the responses we got from Jared Bednar. There's a lot to process here, and it's really not even clear where to go. Before we get into that, guys, we're really lucky that we've been able to bring you guys this coverage here from the road and be a part of all it. And we do want to give a shout out to our partners who help make all that possible, who help make our coverage possible, including the great folks over at Accurate American, or Accurate America, excuse me. Especially being in Colorado, this time of year, the storms are going to come, and you don't always know when they're going to be there until they're about to happen the next day, and it can be a pain. It can be a hassle. Make sure you guys are giving Accurate America a call. 303-900-ROOF. Last thing you want to do is be caught scrambling when the storm does arrive, so make sure you call before the storm. They'll partner with you on navigating insurance, provide quick, professional, and knowledgeable service using the latest technology, 3D modeling, all of it. Best part, guys, I love this. They're going to guarantee it for as long as you own the home. So give Accurate America a call before the storm, 303-900-ROOF. Megan, look, I saw a comment off the top that said when you trade Mikko Rantanen, you either win the Stanley Cup or you lose your job. When that trade happened, you and I both said, look, Chris McFarland might be managing for his job here the rest of the way. I think he did a good job putting a good team together, but it's hard to look at what just happened here and feel super confident about what the future might be for the Avs general manager. For me, Megan, as far as Jared Bednar goes, he's got one more year on his deal. He gets this series to Game 7. I think Jared Bednar's job is pretty safe going into next year. Now, I do think if you want to use the term hot seat, sure, I think you could. Heading into next season, that might be something a little bit more under the microscope. But for my money, I think Jared Bednar probably coached well enough that you don't have to question that, at least for this summer going into next season. Where are you at? Head coach, Chris McFarland, any of that? Or again, is that going to come with more time processing what just happened?
Yeah, I think I need more time to process it because I don't think an instant reaction around such a heavy conversation would be fair to the weight that the conversation carries. However, I will commit to a feeling that they need to reevaluate Ray Bennett's job.
Yeah.
That one, I don't like calling people out by name, but the power play struggling at inopportune times, right? Because in the regular season, you talk about how, well, special teams go in waves, they ebb and they flow and they peak and they dip, and it's fine and you live with it. But the inability to capitalize on the power play when they needed it over the course of this series, it became the difference maker. And my frustration is too, Dallas's PK in response to Colorado's PP is so tailored in a way that someone with a better understanding of the game, there are ways to better support your players. Like, you look at the player, whether it be Drouin on the second unit, sometimes it was Landeskog. There was a little bit more rotation on that top unit with Landeskog, but the player on the half wall, that's sort of QBing from the half wall, right? Dallas would take away time and space with a suffocating speed that neither player who was in that position had an answer for, right? But this movement on behalf of Dallas's PK, it was so aggressive that they would commit to the strong side of the puck and they would rotate who their assignments were using that movement. And it was great at taking away lanes as a result, but there's also weaknesses that you can exploit in that type of a PK that I don't think the Avs did enough. Because you look at the talent on the power play and, all right, you see the way in which their usual tools are being challenged. I understand that. But they didn't have a path forward, and I think they're too good, too highly skilled elite of players to have not found a better path through the ways in which Dallas's aggressive PK was shutting them down. And credit to Dallas's PK. I'm very impressed by that unit and what they did to shut down Colorado's power play. So it was an incredible challenge and they rose to the occasion, but I feel frustration with the power play at this point in time. So I'm not going to get any deeper than that. And honestly, I'm not ready with Nolan Pratt and the kill to have that conversation because I still don't feel as bad about the kill as the numbers show. But I can commit to being critical of the PP.
Yeah. So a couple things to just kind of build on that. Because look, there's going to be a lot of people over the next couple days that are going to be calling for a complete teardown, fire everybody, and that would surprise me, Megan, to see them do something like that. That's just not how this organization has historically operated. The Ray Bennett stuff, like you said, that was the part that I think was the most frustrating for me to watch tonight. Was the part that you said there about like, yeah, it can be really effective, but it's a little bit of a high wire act, that PK, because if you don't do it just right, or if the Avs beat you with a pass, that that's kind of exposing the gaps in the armor of that PK, and that was what I felt like the Avs didn't do enough. And I don't know if that's an execution issue, if that's a Ray Bennett adjustments issue. I don't know, fully what, but that I'm with you. Like, that was my frustration. Very aggressive Dallas PK. They were on every puck that could be contested. They contested it. They made it difficult. They didn't give the Avs time and space to work things around. But again, like you said, there's ebbs and flows, and that's fine. But when you're in a series like this, a game like this, where one more power play goal, that's probably it. And we're probably having a very different show right now. It is really hard to not look at that and say, yeah, that's a clear and obvious problem. But again, this is a team and an organization that has modeled itself off of other teams and organizations that have been successful and had sustained runs of success in the past. And this one stings, maybe worse than any of the others, but I do think there's a lot of perspective that goes along with this series that we'll all only be able to gain here over the next few days. It is really raw. It is really fresh right now to be making any hard decisions. So I'm with you on, let's maybe pump the brakes and see where this goes here over the next couple days. But I really do. Maybe this is oversimplifying, but it's really hard to not feel like this series was won and lost on the power play.
It does feel that way. And similarly, like we talk about how the struggles of the power play do feel like they translate to struggles to convert 5v5. And early in the series, that was particularly true. And so I don't think you can afford that early in the series, right? Like, this could have really changed the trajectory of it. I still think that creating offense the way that the Avs typically like to, even 5v5, was always going to be hard in this series.
Yeah.
But I think there's something about momentum that you can generate confidence from with a successful power play that will bleed into the Avs top six, who I think also could have stood to make a greater impact over the series on the whole. I think, you're looking at players like Netchis and Nelson and even Nichushkin, and they had their respective moments, but it just didn't feel like a collective enough. And I do think that stems from the power play in a different way. And so I also think earlier in the series that when the top six was a bit of a jumbled mess and Gabriel Landeskog had not yet returned, that might have been a different story if the power play was clicking a little bit. And honestly, right, they had the 3 goals in the 3 games, right? Was that right? Two in 3 games, or 3 in 4 games?
Yeah. Three, yeah.
But we were still left wanting, and they were struggling to create 5v5, and a lot of that was Dallas having a say in it too. But I can't help but feel like those things are related.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the part, going back to what I talked about off the top of, like, these series, these games, everything about Avs and Stars is always weird. The Avs did control play at 5-on-5 for pretty much all of this series. And then you look at tonight, no 5-on-5 goals. That's usually, when stuff goes sideways. But it was, Nathan MacKinnon finally breaks through in a Game 7. It puts them up by 2. They get the breathing room. And it just felt like everything was lining up for it to go the Avs' way. And we're sitting here waiting on Dallas, St. Louis. Where are we going? What are we doing? And it just runs away from them quickly. Megan, I want to get to these super chats here. Do you have any other thoughts before we do that?
I mean, we're going to be making lots of content from this point on, but
Yeah.
I did want to also personally thank everybody who's tuned in for our coverage this year. It's our first year together at Guerrilla Sports,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of mixed emotion right now. It's been a great personal year getting to cover the team with you for Guerrilla Sports and all of the people who've tuned in for this content. I really do appreciate all of you. It's hard right now wearing the emotion of the loss, but I didn't want to step away from this one without saying thank you to everyone who is engaged with our content along the way.
No, 100%. And yeah, this has been a crazy season for so many reasons. And for it to come to such a shocking end like that, had they lost a couple nights ago in Game 6 and a back and forth game or whatever, that maybe would have even been easier to cope with. But just to see it go that way, I like you said, we're gonna have a lot of content and a lot of conversation on this game and this series over the next few days as it can kind of settle with everybody. And I want to get to a few thank yous here at the end as well, Megan. But let's get to some of these super chats because I think there's a couple things here that's going to spur some conversation. Yeah, let's start with this first one here. From LA94, $10 from LA94. 3 third-period leads blown, leading to losses, including the game that mattered. PP goes 3 for 22 in the series. Bednar now 0 for 4 against DeBoer. Where do we go from here? That's a little bit of what we were just talking about. But, Megan, for me, I do want to address the DeBoer thing. This is really something for me that I just don't see it as that big of a correlation to who Jared Bednar is as a coach. These are two coaches who are the antithesis of each other in terms of the way they coach, the styles they like to play. Pete DeBoer struggles in the playoffs against pretty much anyone else that's not Jared Bednar. So I'm going to be curious to see where the Stars go. But, I mean, do you have anything else for where we go from here? Or is that kind of piggybacking off what we were saying a minute ago of this needs to breathe for at least 24, 48 hours before we start making any proclamations of where to go next?
Yeah, I think Pete DeBoer is a great coach in his own right, and there's no taking away from that. I think that doesn't also mean that Jared Bednar is also not a great coach in his own right. I think it'll be something to unpack more, but I think both of those things can be true at the same time, even when one coach advances to the next round and the other doesn't. This did go 7 games, and they were tight and they were hard, and DeBoer, leveraged everything the depth had left in its tank, and I'll be curious how that holds up over the rest of these playoffs. Yeah.
Should also point out, one of those coaches has a Stanley Cup and the other doesn't, and it is not Pete DeBoer. $1.99 from our guy, vaguely sober. No matter what, I'm still proud of Gabe returning. This is a storyline that we'll follow here. Not follow, but that we will also unpack. Hey, you're going into next season with some clarity on Gabe Landeskog. That's not nothing, Megan.
No, I hate, too, that it's come to an end like this for this year. But knowing that there are more chapters ahead for Gabriel Landeskog and his hockey career, you can't take away from the joy of that by itself. So I can't believe that he came back and was an effective, strong player in these playoffs after 3 years of missing time. And goodness, I think, too, you reflect on some of the other exits that the Avs have had these last couple of years without him as their captain. And I don't know about you guys, but I still hold out a little more hope for the future of this Avs team past this season, and a lot of it is because of Gabriel Landeskog.
That is it, Megan. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to throw up this other one from Vaguely Sober because I think we all need a laugh here. Another $1.99 from Vaguely Sober. We're all going to wake up with bangs tomorrow, aren't we? I think Megan already booked her appointment, her midnight bangs.
Yeah, I'm cutting them myself in 20 minutes.
Thomas, get the scissors away from Megan. Don't let Megan grab the scissors.
You can't stop me.
I will say this, though, Megan, and again, like, people don't want to hear this right now, and I know that. This Avs team, there's still so much to like about them going forward, and this is still going to be a very good team next year. That means nothing to folks right now, and I know that, but I do just want to make sure I throw that out there. You know, what you were just saying about, like, there's more chapters, there's more to be excited about. This is going to be a very good team next year. This is going to be a team that competes for a Stanley Cup next year. Nobody wants to hear that right now, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to stop talking about it. $9.99 from Hurricane Teabag. Firing Chris McFarland doesn't seem like enough. Got to do something worse than that. Also, thank you, Meg, Jesse, Chloe. If only C-Mac was as good as you three. Again, like we talked about, I need to let this one breathe here for the next couple days before we start making any of those decisions. I think everything Chris McFarland did this year was defensible in the moment. It's impossible to not feel the way that Hurricane's talking about here when Mikko Rantanen just put a hat trick on you to send you home. I totally understand the sentiment.
Yeah, I think too, like, I obviously was in alignment with a lot of the moves McFarland made around the deadline. Like, I was pulling for Nelson, I was pulling for Quell, right? But a lot of these are very reactive to needs of the team not being addressed in the offseason, and the unraveling of the goaltending at the start of the year forced some big changes. And so I think that's a worthy conversation no matter which side you come out of on it. And I like you, am waiting for that full conversation, but I think it's a worthy conversation to have.
Yeah, it's one that has to be had. As defensible as it maybe feels in the moment, you can't trade a franchise cornerstone, get eliminated by them, and then feel like, everything's fine. We'll jump to another, I'm sorry, $2 here from Drew. Let the players decide the game is a joke today. That genuinely, Megan, that is how I feel about this game. I'm not saying one way or the other. This was not a let the players battle this one out type of Game 7. And I just found that to be crazy. Another $2 from Drew. Just fire Wes McCauley, the lead official tonight. He won the game. Again, a lot of calls in this game, more so than I expected. This other one tied back in with the other super chat from Hurricane Teabag. Thanks to you guys. I wanted to fire McFarland, is how I'm going to read that. I wanted McFarland gone after the Mikko trade. This isn't a gut reaction. It's time. Again, this is no doubt a conversation that needs to be had. There's a lot to unpack on the Chris McFarland front. I think Chris McFarland's a smart guy. I think you have to weigh the overall body of work of what he's done in his time with the Avs, not just this season, before you make a decision like this. But like you said, Megan, it's a conversation that is to be had, no doubt about it. Gonna grab this one here. $1.99 from Vaguely. We still have the Eagles. They are up 1-0 in their series. Did they play again tonight?
I think it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So they got a 1-0 lead in their series on the San Jose Barracuda, but yeah, still got that. $1.99 from Vaguely Sober. And then we're going to round it out before we get out of here for tonight. Another $1.99 from Vaguely Sober. Thank you guys for the awesome coverage this year. Megan, I don't have enough time on this show to thank everyone in the way that I want to. This has been just to get a little personal here. This has been an unbelievably challenging last year and a half for me, for us as a company. Challenging in the sense of there's so much work that goes into every last thing. Interviews, editing, social media, these shows. We got you and Thomas in the studio right now, late after a long night. I got Mark here, and we had to kind of scramble late last night to get Mark here so that we could pull this off and get things at the quality and the speed that people have come to expect from us. And I mean, like, when I say it's been 7 days a week, every week for the last year and a half plus, I mean it in the truest sense of those words. And there's been times where it's been emotional, challenging, draining. I mean, pick an adjective. And to the point that you made earlier, Megan, what makes every last second of it worth it is getting the privilege and the opportunity to sit down in this chair, talk hockey with you in front of such amazing people that we have that listen and support and show up every night, every post game. They like and they follow and they comment and super chats and all of that. And it's just, it's overwhelming for me to think about all the people that help make this happen and to be able to, through all the challenging moments, get these moments where it's a ton of fun and we get to say how lucky are we that we do this and how lucky are we that we have the type of people that support us that we do. I'll eventually here in the next week or two have a more well-spoken way of saying thank you to everyone, but I just can't express the gratitude enough for what people have shown us for a company that we are scratching and clawing every day to provide you guys the coverage that we would want if we were on the other side. So thank you all so much. I want to give a thank you to Mark, to Chloe, Thomas, who's there, Blake, who helps make every last thing that we do possible. Just like I said, so many people to thank here at the end of this season. I can't believe it's done, but we're not going anywhere, so we got a lot more ahead of us. One last super chat that came in from Drew. McFarland was good. NHL has a narrative, and the narrative won. I think that's why I need a few days to process all this, Megan. There's a million narratives going into tonight. The narratives won out. We got to wait to sift through to see, are we talking about the narratives or are we talking about things that are actually a problem here that need to be addressed? So, Megan, any final thoughts on your side?
I can think of a way that you can articulate a thanks to everybody listening, and it's in the form of cartwheels.
Yeah, well, and see, Chloe just got herself off the hook for a cartwheel, but not if I have anything to say about it. We're just going to have a cartwheel cast here coming up soon.
Yeah, next week, cartwheel content coming your way. I'm just kidding.
Way.
We'll get into some real stuff with you guys. We need to process a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, if this was a normal game, we could have maybe had a better X's and O's type of conversation tonight, but that was shocking. Hard to process all of it. Let's jump out of here, Megan. Like I said, we've got a week's worth of content where we're going to be talking about this game, this series, what happens next, Jared Bednar, Chris McFarland, all of that. We're going to get into all of it, and we'll go from there. Thank you guys again so much. Big thank you to our partners over at Accurate America. This is the busiest time of year for this type of stuff. If you are a homeowner, make sure you guys are giving them a call before you wind up in a compromised situation. 303-900-ROOF. Call before the storm. They're going to work with your insurance. They're guaranteeing that work for as long as you are in the home. We have just had such a great start to our relationship with Accurate America. We look so forward to working with them in the future. Big thanks to them helping make all of this possible. 303-900-ROOF. Best in the biz. Call Accurate America before the storm gets you. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Big thank you to Mark, Chloe, Blake, Thomas there in the studio with you, Megan. An absolute heartbreaker. Near the top of the list for all-time heartbreakers in Avs history. But, hey, we're going to wake up tomorrow. Sun's going to be out, and we're going to have a lot more to unpack, a lot more hockey to talk about. And then we'll blink, and before you know it, we'll be right back at it with preseason hockey. But we're not going anywhere for the offseason. You're stuck with us for the next few months. So
threat.
We're going to get out of here, get packed up, and get back to Denver. So thank you all so much, not just for tonight, but for the entire season. We wish we were keeping these games going, and we wish we had more games to cover, but that'll do it for the 2024-2025 Colorado Avalanche season. They lose in 7 games to the Dallas Stars. She's Megan. I'm Jesse. Big thanks to everyone, and we'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.